In 2024, I traveled thousands of miles to capture some of nature's greatest spectacles and rarest birds. This is the story of my journey starting in America and headed towards the most incredible moment I've ever had out in Norway. But it all began with an unexpected encounter. On May 17th, 2024, my wife and I were on vacation taking a nice stroll along Laguna Beach and listening to a concert in the park, when suddenly, there it was. We had stopped in a cove, and to my amazement, a Class 3 ABA Rarity was right in front of my eyes. I've barely ever had the privilege of discovering a local rarity, much less a national one. But sure enough, this bird was so rare that people signed up for the ABA Rarity reports all across North America would all receive an email the following morning with my sighting. But something was wrong. This bird was just too comfortable with people. After just a few mere moments, I could tell that it must have been injured or sick and had fallen off course due to this. That would explain why it's in the area. My excitement for seeing the rarest thing I have ever seen in my life was now accompanied by sadness for the bird. Because of being on vacation, I was armed with nothing but my 50mm portrait lens and an old camera body that I brought along. But I still managed to snag some beautiful pictures of this majestic bird and capture this moment forever. The emotion seemed visible in the bird's eyes as it struggled to stay strong. I spent about an hour with the bird, confused on what I could do for it. It sat there in the beach sand, but often moved onto small rocks, most likely just out of instinct. However, unlike a normal bird, when the waves would come, it was tragic to see it get smashed down by the forces. As it walked around aimlessly, multiple times I would see this bird get seemingly drowned by the waves and muster all its energy to stand back up and keep on moving into an unknown land. It was lost, it was sick, and all I could do was report it on eBird, hoping that local regulators would be immediately notified due to the rarity of the bird and send a rescue team in the morning. Now, only time would tell if this bird would make it through the night. The next morning, I checked on eBird, and sure enough, the birders had heard my call. And even before the alerts went out nationally, they had gone to pick it up. They determined there were seemingly no injuries, so it must have been sick, and hopefully they can nurse it back to health. This encounter with the masked booby was completely unexpected, but in my next encounter, I would come prepared. For the past 5 years, I've spent the early summers searching for an elusive bird called the mountain quail up in the mountains where I live. During mating season, the call of this bird can be heard for miles echoing through the forest. But getting up close with them is a whole different ballgame. They're skittish, and almost always when you're right about to see one, they run off on you, deep into the thicket, nowhere to be found. I've been successful in past years getting decent photos of them, but I am still missing the perfect shot of one that I'm really hoping for. So, coming up on this 5th year of attempting to photograph them, I'm making my final attempt to get an amazing photo of a mountain quail. And what I was able to get this year was far from what I was expecting. As most summers have begun, I started off at my special location I have for a singing fox sparrow. In previous years, I've gotten some amazing photos here, and when you catch this location right at sunrise, it's a golden spot. The lighting comes through the line of trees in the background in interesting patterns. You can use foreground elements pretty much however you'd like with the bushes, and you can always rely on the fox sparrow that claims this territory to be singing in the mornings here. If conditions are right, you can even get bird breath as he sings over his land. Getting here well before sunrise gave me some time to set up angles and search for what I liked, but my attention was fixed on the fox sparrow. As the sun continued to rise, the breath had disappeared, and the sun was beginning to get too harsh. While I couldn't get exactly what I wanted, I still got some pretty nice frames of the fox sparrow with foreground elements accenting the image nicely.
my goodness. We literally had a mountain quail just right there on the edge of the meadow. And I've never, ever in my 5 years of photographing them, gotten to see them on the edge of the meadow right there. But it flushed off because it was way too close to me. But oh my goodness, that was really cool. Now, before we move on with this adventure, let me introduce to you the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. As anyone who follows me knows, I recently hosted the 2024 Wildlife Photography Competition, the only wildlife photography competition judged live in the world, a few months ago, and I couldn't have done so without Squarespace. With their online storefront and intuitive design tools, I was able to build a website for the competition that outlines everything that a participant needs to know in a way that's aesthetic, yet easy to understand. Then, give them an option to enter. It's so easy, even these ducks can do it. Their email marketing also comes in handy, as many of you know that I send out a newsletter called the Wilder Leaflet that includes exclusive discounts from a sponsor each month with other exciting news in the wildlife community. I've also been using Squarespace to email over invoices to clients during some of my one-on-one mentorship sessions, recently with students. Their invoicing tools directly through Squarespace make it easy for me to set up a one-time payment for a client to pay. If you're interested in trying out Squarespace for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/JeremyKnipe to receive 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
With no mountain quail photos yet, I continued my search around the forest. After 5 years of visiting the same remote meadow, I've grown fond of the place, and it's sad to see this journey wrap up to an end. But you know what they say, all good things come to an end, and it felt right to move on from this place after this year. On the way out from the meadow, an American robin was grazing in it, and I spent a moment with it, just for old time's sake. Crossing the stream through the meadow, I looked closer into the water and noticed an unholy sight. No wonder why they say not to go in stagnant waters. I know I don't want these little critters crawling on me. The following week, I returned to another day in the meadow. Little did I know, this would be my last excursion I'd have in the area, and my time in the meadow would come to an end. I decided to head over to an old familiar area this morning, the spot where I've gotten my best photos of mountain quail yet, over in a tiny gorge slope running up a hill. I've always heard mountain quail here, and it seems to be one of the hottest spots for them, so I'd bank my luck there once again today. I made my way over to the location and set myself up waiting for a quail. I was hearing some up out beyond some of the trees, so I was hoping they would make their way up this hill like they typically do, and if so, I would be ready. After 5 years of countless times chasing, waiting, and finding, I was hoping that this was the one time I would get it right. All I needed was one good moment. As I sat there for the next 20 minutes and the sun was just about to come over the edge, I finally got my chance. 2 mountain quail came out foraging from the side of the tree line. Placing myself behind the bush kept me less visible and less intimidating to them. And staying still, this seemed to be my first time ever with them not flushing immediately upon sightline. I couldn't believe that my moment had finally come. 5 years had boiled down to this moment, and as they foraged along that hillside, one hopped up onto a rock, giving some fantastic views to get an amazing photo. I could not believe that I finally got shots as good as these ones with such a difficult bird. By far my best images of them, and I couldn't think of a better way to wrap up this series than with this photo. After so much work, I'm finally happy to be able to say I have good photos of mountain quail from my local area. It goes to show that the best things in life aren't always easy, but almost always worth it. Photographing these 2 rare birds in the spring of 24 was a treat. Moving back in time, at the beginning of the year, I got to witness some incredible sights too, with thousands of migrating waterfowl and cranes near me. I got some amazing footage of beautiful wildlife. But wildlife photography images can be about more than just the wildlife. That's why, near the beginning of 2024, I set out to capture some iconic landscape scenes in the background of bird images.
There's so much potential right now with that Golden Gate Bridge in the background. Oh, there's just nothing. Oh, I am so disappointed. I could probably make something do with everything we got, but not gonna be ideal. Not gonna be what I pictured.
After traveling for a day to get up to San Francisco, my plans for the first sunset of photography seemed ruined. Not a single bird in sight. I started to look out to the ocean to try and salvage the situation.
I might not get the shot that I'm looking for, but that is a long-tailed duck out there, which I've never ever photographed before, and it is swimming away. And it's a rarity in this area. See if he lands again.
But these far-out subjects and disinteresting scenes could only entertain me for so long. Something that was cool was to see how the surf scoter in the area fought against the waves. As huge and heavy waves approached, their ability to glide over the top seamlessly or dart under the hundreds of pounds of water crashing over them is incredible. But after an hour of trying to make something of it and no real photos as a result, I turned to a new possibility.
So this is about as disappointing as it gets. I drove all the way to San Francisco today in hopes of getting that beautiful, iconic Golden Gate Bridge in the background behind shots of some shorebirds up on this beach. I'd seen that shorebirds do come to this beach on eBird, yet when I'm here today, there's not a single shorebird in sight. And so I've traveled all the way here. I'm without the iconic kind of photograph that I was looking for initially.
And it felt like all hope was lost. With only a single hour remaining, I decided to hike down to another beach a half mile down the way. This beach would be crowded and filled with people, which was a downside, but I figured that at the very least, there would have to be gulls there attempting to rob people of their food, which would give me a subject to work with on the Golden Gate photograph I wanted. As I arrived, I immediately made out the locations that the gulls were frequenting on the beach, one of them being a wash out into the ocean. So I made my way over, started getting as low as I could to create some art. Luckily, they were feeding on some crabs getting washed down to the stream, as well as simply using the water to drink from. So they cooperated really well with the few precious minutes I now had left before sunset. Out of nowhere, a group of sanderlings flew right in front of me and started running around the beach like madmen. It's incredible to see how fast these little guys are, and even compared to me trying to keep up with them and reposition up front, I simply couldn't. So after a while, I headed back to the wash to wait for that perfect shot and moment that I came for. As the sunset came to a close, for a brief moment, heaven seemed to open up and light up the Golden Gate Bridge with some perfect light. As this happened, the western gull came into perfect framing and I fired off the shot that I was hoping for. As a California native, I've never captured a shot that quite represented my state so well for wildlife photography. And while not the shorebirds I was hoping for, this photograph still turned out almost as good as I could have hoped. And I'm so glad I finally captured this iconic state image that I've always dreamt of. But my time in San Francisco wasn't over just yet. The next morning, I would get the best shot of waterfowl of my whole career and get an encounter unbelievably close. For now, I enjoyed the sun setting over the mountains behind me, and I got to experience the Golden Gate Bridge heading into night and captured some gorgeous lights out in the distance behind the gulls. I arrived on location nearly an hour before sunrise, making it super dark as I looked around the park for any initial signs of life. This morning, I was trying my luck at the Golden Gate Park, a massive 3.5 mile long park in the heart of San Francisco. It's incredible to see places like this, where nature and humans can thrive together in tandem, and people can enjoy nature. As the morning started off, I spotted another iconic bridge that I had come to photograph today in the background of some bird photos. Crossing Stowe Lake and leading to the famous Strawberry Hill is the bridge erected in 1893 that defines the scene here at the Golden Gate's most famous lake. In these early morning hours, mallards and Canada geese posed for me in front of this famous site, but no other species were in this area of the lake yet. I headed over to the other side of the bridge and was pleased to bump into a group of American robin and Steller's jays feasting on a berry bush. Watching these songbirds throw a berry seemingly the size of a throat down the hatch is always fun to watch. And with some beautiful morning light through the trees, I was able to capture an image I decently liked. Over on the other side of the bridge, some more mallards were hanging out. This side seemed to offer a better view of the bridge as well, which was exciting, and I took my chances with a few pairs that would swim up to us and around the area. Just a little ways further down the path, I bumped into a song sparrow singing on an open perch, with some incredible backlighting and scenery, alongside a dark-eyed junco foraging nearby. Both made for some unexpected yet incredible takeaway photos. Before the day was up, I would get another amazing encounter and my favorite photo I've ever taken of waterfowl coming soon. But first, I crossed the bridge and adventured over to Strawberry Hill to experience some of what it must have felt like back when the park was erected. Being in touch with nature and the world around us is so important, and sometimes we can think of this as a new discovery, but even back in this park's founding in 1870, people knew that this was important to have an escape away from everyday city life. After adventuring around the hill and taking in some beautiful skyline views, I came back down to the water's edge and ran across a great blue heron hunting for something amongst the tall vegetation. I stuck with him for a little while, but the angles weren't quite ideal for photography, and I didn't want to get too close and in his way, so I eventually left him alone. Further down the way, I took a stop for a few birds, including a raven that had stopped to inspect some human food. While ravens are often given a bad rep for being creepy, they are actually some of the most intelligent animals alive today and are beautiful with their shiny feathers when you get to encounter them up close. As I was making my way around the base of the hill, I spotted some ducks I had really wanted to photograph here on my trip. A family of ring-necked ducks was swimming around close to the shore, and even more unbelievably, a bold and lone hooded merganser that I rarely get to see. Not only are these birds incredibly beautiful, but I had never gotten to get either of these subjects in photos that I really liked, so I was praying for a first. As they swam around, they got incredibly close up with me. Their stunning yellow eyes, incredible head displays, and feathers are fascinating and inspiring. And as the sun faded in and out, I got some in ideal backgrounds and captured the photos I was dreaming for. I love the way these backgrounds turned out. Some colorful and some moody, and after an incredible sunset and sunrise out in San Francisco, my plans didn't go exactly as expected, but rather, they paid off in other ways that I couldn't have planned for. I'm thankful that our world has beautiful creatures like this for us to experience, and I hope this video inspired you to notice nature wherever you are in the world, even if it's at your city's local park. But the journey doesn't end here. I've always been captivated by the rocky shorelines of Northern Europe, in particular, the fjords of Norway. And finally, after years of wanting to witness it for myself, it was time to visit. Since I was a kid, I had always dreamed of seeing puffins. Fascinating creatures with their beaks able to hold mouthfuls of fish, and with the capability of diving nearly 200 feet underwater. These parrots of the sea are miraculous. Seeing them up close and in person, building a family has always been a goal of mine. So much so that I'm traveling 5,000 miles from California in the United States all the way to a Norwegian island in order to try and follow a few puffins on these cliffs, building a family. Through this adventure, I'd come across disappointments and the realities of nature. But I'd also get to witness a family being built and some of the most stunning views of my whole life. This is that story. This video is made for the people who have inspired me for so long to do what I do here on YouTube, crafting stories about the natural world. This video may very well be the most important video I've ever made, and you'll find out why later in the video. But all I can say is that this moment in time is one I'll always look back at and remember. After a long travel from sunny California to cloudy Norway, I had finally arrived back on land. Norway is a stunning country, mountain peaks mixed in and socializing with the ocean. No matter where you drive, views always surround you. And after a few hours, we had arrived on the island of Runde. Runde is a small island off the coast of Norway known mostly for two things: its famous shipwreck back in 1725 and the immense amount of birds that nest on the island. The sun doesn't set until nearly midnight up this far north, and so when we arrived, I took a short scout of the island around our Airbnb at the base of it. In the darkness of the storm, I explored the roadways leading up the trail to the mountain, and while I didn't find much, I did find these massive black slugs all over the island, and a black-billed magpie near our home. Now, it was time to rest up and head out the following morning. Every single species I was encountering this morning was a new bird for me, being from across the Atlantic. It was almost overwhelming passing up on trying to get good photos of all these new birds, but I knew I had to stay focused on what mattered most and what I really came here for. To get the puffin photos I was really hoping for, I'd have to devote the time and energy required to getting the perfect shot. While I was still on my way to the trail, suddenly a white wagtail pair popped right up in front of me with an incredible mating dance. I couldn't believe my eyes. I just so happened to be filming in this moment and captured this beautiful courtship display of the two as they prepared for nesting season. Clearly, this male had to earn his place in her heart first.
Oh my goodness. I am seeing all new species today being in Europe photographing for the first time, and not only that, just got to watch a mating dance of two wagtail, which was just incredible. Already amazing start to the day, and I am so excited to get what I really came here for.
The guardians of Runde stood between me and the bird cliffs I was headed towards. But not much of a threat, they let me pass by, and they would sort of become a reminder through the next few days of the pace of life I would live this week on the island. As I continued to climb, the views got better and better, and as I neared halfway up the mountain, I encountered my first pair of great skua, a larger-than-life bird that comes to the top of the island to nest during the summers. Unfortunately, I'm here about a month before this island turns green up in the boggy areas, so the grass still blends in all too well to the skua, making it hard to get them contrasted with the scenery. But it was still a cool encounter to have. Making their nests in little divots in the environment, I wanted to capture the scene around them rather than just go for a close-up, and I noticed two lakes way off in the distance behind them. So I pulled out my 135 1.8 and fired off a scenic image of their nesting area amongst the grand landscape of this island's bog. This wouldn't be the only time I opted to try and capture the magnificent beauty of the island alongside the bird in a scenic shot, as later on, I would find my favorite photos of the whole trip to be the same, but with the prettiest bird species on the island. Passing the lighthouse, I ran across the weirdest sound I've ever heard. Out from the rocks, a funny group of guillemot appeared, another one of the island's nesting birds. But after they quickly dove off the ledge, it was time to make my way towards another group of birds I was looking forward to seeing on this trip. We had finally summited the highest mountain on the island, Rundebranden. From this vantage point, you could get views of the island's population of northern gannet. Gannets are stunning birds with bright white bodies faded into gold and bright blue eye rings. Unfortunately, while the view is breathtaking from above, it does keep you pretty far away from the colony, far down below, making it difficult to get any easy shots. To get something good here, I knew I'd have to use a little extra creativity. Working around the limited space and trying to capture different angles, I finally settled on using the new Sigma 500mm at a slow shutter speed to try and capture more smooth lines and brush strokes in my images. While getting overhead sharp in-flight shots was cool, it felt somewhat ordinary, so I needed a way to break it. For the next 30 minutes or so, I sat there tracking bird after bird, burst slow shutter shot after shot. And at the end of it all, I was happy to have finally captured a few images that I really liked, and that show off the deep blue ocean water beneath them. On one, I even managed to capture some nesting material in its beak as it flew by. But my time with the gannet wasn't over. I started to notice a duel between two gannets taking place down on the cliff. Prime space for gannet nesting is limited, and to gain access, you need to claim your spot. One gannet flew up onto a cliff and started fighting for the rights to the same area as a pair that was already there. They locked beaks and braced themselves with their wings, and the battle commenced. As I watched for the next 5 minutes, one gannet finally gained the upper hand and shoved the other off the cliff. This is why it's so important to protect areas like this in nature. While it may seem to the human eye like there's plenty of space for birds like this to live, gannets need a very specific set of conditions to survive in the wild, including open rocky cliffs and specific food sources. And without access to prime real estate, these birds would simply cease to exist. In fact, the whole island of Rund is important because of this. The variety of cliffs offers different nesting sites to different birds, and the meeting of these two massive ocean currents right outside the island provides for the collection of food these bird species need to live. Back at the base of the mountain, I met back up with Jimmy, a fellow wildlife photographer from Sweden I was excited to meet up with. What's really awesome is that Jimmy has been a longtime follower of my channel, but I've gotten to know him through a series of different events. He got put on my map with his image of an Atlantic puffin that actually placed in the annual photo competition I host. So it's a really cool full circle moment where I got to know Jimmy because of these puffins in his photograph from Rund, and now he's here to meet up with me and photograph puffins here once again. As we approached the Puffin Cliffs, my excitement had grown to an immense level. This was the moment I had traveled for. The wind had picked up to a stiff 40-mile-an-hour gust. It was intense. The cold was quickly getting to me and not a puffin was in sight. And then, out of nowhere, a black cloud of puffins approached from the distance over the sea. Almost as if on the cue of an orchestra, they suddenly swarmed the cliffs in a swirling vortex, with half of them remaining in flight and half of them coming in to search the hillsides. The show had begun. Currently, around 58,000 Atlantic puffin call the cliffs of Rund their home, and in every direction you look, they can be spotted. It was almost too much to take in. I captured photos left and right of puffins in every type of background and position that felt imaginable. These were incredible opportunities to get amazing photographs with a tight lens like the Sigma 500 5.6. However, I knew that I also needed to try to make sure and go a little wider. I pulled out my 135 once more and looked for some scenic angles with a smaller puffin in frame and more extensive views of the scenery. While some of these turned out good, I felt like I still couldn't get quite as much seen as I would have liked. As the night approached, puffins started to gather nesting materials to add to their nests. To me, it's one of the most inspiring things to witness, is a male and female couple coming together each year like these puffins do to build a family and raise them up. Each year, they return to the same place, with the same partner and the same goal in mind. And right now, in the month of May, it's nest building season. The winds were far too strong to hear it tonight, but the males and females will gently call to each other and flick their heads back as a sign of affection, by which afterwards, they'll seal it with a little beak rubbing action. The puffins worked tirelessly to gather the grasses on the hillsides, yanking and pulling away. But it was almost comical to me to watch them fight the high winds as they did so, as you can see this puffin in the video tried to. As he gets fed up with the grass whipping him in the face, he tries to readjust, losing nearly all the grass in the process. Well, I guess literally all of it. This behavior was precious to watch, and as the night ended, I felt decently satisfied with the images I had gotten. Yet, I knew that I could do even better. I spotted a puffin come up way closer than expected to the fence, off to the side, and it gave me an idea. While I had a lot of tight shots, I wanted something that showed off and represented the island of Runda that these puffins live on. So, the next day, I'd be ready with my 24 to 70mm to try and get a shot of these puffins if one came up super close. That would be the shot I was dreaming of. The night came down on our first evening adventuring out on the island. On the way back, I found a perfect cliff edge where you could see a pair of puffins hanging out and decided to name them Puffy and Scarpa. We'd follow up with them later in the video. Runda was beautiful, breathtaking, and everything I thought it would be. But the journey had just begun. The next morning, the storm was raging, but it looked like the evening would clear up again. Jimmy introduced me to Swedish candy, and I took time to look through photos from the previous day. Happy with what I had captured, today I was determined to get even better. The weather forecast showed a very exciting possibility. While the cloud cover was supposed to be constant on this trip, there was forecasted to be a single 2-hour opening of sunlight right before sunset this evening, which would provide for some fantastic and unique lighting I could take advantage of. We passed by the gauntlet of sheep once again as we headed up the mountain, and today, being a much clearer day, had swarms of people hiking by as we headed up the mountain to the Puffin Cliffs. As we first got over the top, I stopped to notice some razorbill further down by the ocean. While none ever came into decent view for some good photos, I did happen to capture a pair mating far down on the cliffs below. Sure enough, the sun was out, and the puffins were all ready to work, gathering and building nests. I moved over to the area where you can get closest to puffins, and there was already a large group of people posted up. Luckily, I knew where the best spot would be to place myself from my experience yesterday, so I patiently waited for the area to clear up, then moved into position. There are 2 pairs of white-tailed eagle that are known to nest on the island, and they happened to come by, giving us a show. What seemed to be a territory dispute was cool to watch, but all happened far out and didn't give any good results for photos. I worked for nearly the next hour to capture photos of puffins at tighter angles and in flight. They are incredibly fast birds, making it so hard to get a good in-flight shot as they dart around at over 50 miles per hour. Eventually, I would land a few decent ones though, and focus back on sound compositions of ones standing on the rocks. The colors in this lighting brought the Puffin Cliffs to life as I looked down on them, and as I was observing different scenes to photograph, it was then that I noticed a sad sight. A pair of puffins was rubbing beaks with one another and bonding, when I noticed some nasty scars on the side of one's face. Not sure what had gotten this puffin injured, but clearly this parent was still working hard to provide for its family. It's things like this that are seen that put the reality of nature in perspective. Regardless of the injuries, one must press on and do what's best for it and the colony. Let's name this guy Scarface for being the baddest puffin of them all. Then suddenly, a puffin flew up right in front of me and barely more than an arm's reach away. I couldn't believe my eyes. Just like I had prepared for, I quickly snatched the camera from my second shooter with the 24-70 mounted on it and worked to capture photos of these puffins at truly wide angles. I could not believe how bold and how close these guys were getting. And it wasn't just one or two, but as time went on, more and more came up close, resulting in many different opportunities of capturing unique compositions of the cliffside. While I lost my B-roll cam in these moments, my second shooter got this clip with his phone to show off just how incredibly close up these puffin were to me. It was an incredible evening, and as the sun started to set and the people were dissipating, I found myself capturing an incredible image of two Atlantic puffin, getting a little feisty with each other, and wings spread wide open. My day of what I had thought would be the best photos of my whole entire trip had come to a close. At least, that's what I thought. And man, was I wrong. As we walked down from the cliffs that evening, overwhelming gratitude filled my heart. The island of Runde is beautiful at twilight, and by this point, it had become a very familiar way to wind down my day, walking in the evening. It was time to say goodbye to Jimmy, and I had loved getting to meet him in person. The next day, I decided to go on a short road trip to explore some more of Norway. I hiked Andalsnes, which has a stunning overlook of a fjord valley, and getting to the top was no easy task. But once I was up there, I couldn't have imagined a much more captivating view. The forests of Norway are unreal, lush and green. Hiking through them felt as if I was on a different planet from my home place in California. I drove through fjord after fjord as we approached our next stop, the Atlantic Ocean Road, named by many popular magazines as the most scenic drive in the world. While the day we arrived was overcast, unfortunately, it was still an awesome experience to hop along this archipelago of islands strung out beneath the highway, and to get to adventure around some of them on the way. At one point, these islands used to be scattered with fishing villages, and you can still see remnants of them today mixed between the concrete bridges that hop from island to island. On one island, I stopped to film a group of black-legged kittiwake nesting under a bridge, and while nothing amazing came of it, it was still great to see these birds in person. After the previous day of exploring off the island, I decided to spend my final morning exploring the old fishing port of the town and visiting the visitor center. Old Norwegian towns are no joke, and every bit as charming and iconic as they look in the photos. And I enjoyed getting to walk around the port while imagining what life must have been like for Norwegians back in the day where the fishing port was alive and the lifeblood of the community. The Visitors Center was informative and really put the decline of seabirds in perspective. In less than 50 years, the population of puffin on the island have declined from 190,000 to 58,000. Shag from 6,000 to just a mere 300, but even more drastically, guillemot from 35,000 to a small 1,000, and black-legged kittiwake from 300,000 to only 500. These numbers should be shocking, and it mostly comes down to problems with fishing in our oceans more than anything else. It's something that's important to be aware of, and I'd encourage anyone who cares to do research on how the state of today's oceans is affected by commercial fishing. Right outside the Visitors Center was a bunch of gulls nesting on a small cliffside and socializing down in by the bay. I worked for a little bit to get a few clips and photos, but nothing notable. I did see my first ever wild gray lag goose around the town, which is funny considering that I've only ever seen introduced farm ones in the United States, and never a truly wild one. It was now the final evening out. I wasn't expecting much of the day, maybe a few shots here or there, but little did I know that by the end of tonight, it would undoubtedly be the most incredible experience I've ever had in nature, and my favorite photos I've ever captured. Hiking around the island one last time was sentimental. It's rare I find a place that I feel truly free and unbound by concrete or unsurpassable environments. But on Rund, everything felt possible, and I was ready to give it one more try at getting a good puffin photo. You see, there was one particular angle I was hoping to get a wide-angle shot at yesterday that I didn't capture. I was hoping that a puffin would hop right up on this rock where you get a beautiful landscape in the distance, with the curve of the island and Norway out in the distance. But it never came. Tonight, I was hoping to position myself correctly and pray that a puffin came by that spot, and to get the perfect image that I was wanting. I started off by the area I had spotted razorbills at the day before, and I worked really hard to get something, but this was the best I got. They're so dug in on a steep cliff that it makes it really hard to get any angle, but the one gap I found in the rocks from above would have to suffice. A cute little puffin came right up near me and was foraging for some nesting material. It was a brief encounter, but man, it's so funny to see how cute and bold these little guys are, no matter where you are on the island.
Can always count on the real wildlife to greet us. Off to the last grand finale of the night.
Once again, I had come to pay my dues to the puffins. And to my surprise, there were much less people here today, which was really nice. Puffy and Scarpa were back at their burrow's ledge, and as the evening went on, more puffins would occasionally join them to check out the area, then leave again soon after. I got into position and took out the wide-angle lens once again. Possibly due to the smaller number of people, they seemed to be getting so much closer up tonight, and I found them constantly walking right up to me and giving me the most incredible angles I've ever hoped to capture. I switched back and forth between tight and wide angles, and finally captured the iconic close-up shots that you imagine when you think of puffins. On my final night, it was finally coming together perfectly, with nearly no flaws. Now, the only thing to do was to capture the perfect wide angle I was dreaming of. As darkness started to settle over the ocean and land, everyone had eventually left, leaving me alone with the beauty of nature. It also happened to be the most peaceful night, and the wind had all but died down, allowing me to hear the gentle voice of the puffin as they called to each other across the hillsides. The sound was unreal, so innocent and gentle, and sitting there all alone with such magnificent creatures and such a magnificent view felt like heaven on earth. These birds seemed to all make sense now. Their behaviors, their being, and I was overcome with thankfulness that I, a simple human, am a part of something so grand and beautifully created. And finally, the moment had come. As a puffin walked out onto the rock I was praying for, I clicked the shutter and captured my favorite photo of my whole life. A puffin, wings spread, looking out into the Atlantic Ocean, from his home towering above. Wow. The journey doesn't end there though. Off to my other side, a male and female were romancing each other on the cliffside. And I sat and watched for a bit as they graced each other with their calls. This image is particularly special to me because at the time of you watching this video, my wife is either just about to have or has already had our first children. 2 sons. Twins, I know, right? Right now, the only thing on my mind often is the joy of being a father and building my own nest with my wife. I feel so blessed that God gave us not only 1, but 2 baby boys to take care of, love on, and to show them the world. Seeing these puffin prepare for their family throughout my time in Norway has brought me nearly to tears in seeing the joy and value of life. Animal life, but even more so human life. To think that puffins can do the hard, yet so rewarding task of raising up a child in a tough world gives me some extra encouragement to do it myself. And to see their unrelenting sacrifices they make to do so inspires me to be a better man myself. Cherish life, for there is so much beauty within it. So, as the night came to an end, I reflected on these things and prayed a prayer of blessing over my sons to come. Dad loves you. There are some moments that stand out in one's memory for a lifetime. This trip to Runda symbolizes the coming of a new era for me, with so much hope ahead and a whole new life just waiting to start. A memoir to the goodness of my past and all its memories, and an invitation to the new and great things God has planned. This world is filled with wonder, in the big and in the small. And if this life is the only one I live, I'd be happy to do it all over again. Thanks for the memories of my youth, and thanks for all the great things yet to come. Love you all. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support my work, you can purchase prints you see from this video through my website, linked in the description below. See you all in 2025.